and you hold yourself accountable to that fun, that time. And if all you can squeeze in is half an hour, I don't care. Do it. But make sure it's something that you love to do. And keep that promise to yourself. It's just like a workout. It's just like brushing your teeth, frankly. It's keeping your tank full. Joy fills our tank. Joy gives us more energy. Joy gives us that balance when things are really heavy so that we can go back and do the heavy thing.
Welcome back to the You Need a Counselor podcast. This is a show presented by Heart and Solutions Counseling Agency. We release new episodes every Sunday at 5 p.m. Central and encourage you to batch up that laundry, put away the dishes, plan for the week ahead, or do any other task that might seem daunting while you give our show a listen. You might just be encouraged to call your therapist, connect with this week's guest, or seek out those services you've been considering for a while but haven't made the commitment to yet. If you are in the state of Iowa and are in need of mental or behavioral health counseling, give us a call at 1-800-531-4236. Enjoy the show.
So hello and welcome back to the You Need a Counselor podcast. My name is Dr. Julie Johnson. I'm the president and founder here at Heart and Solutions, mental health counseling and behavioral health counseling here in Iowa.
And I'm Chrissa Hunt. I am our vice president in charge of the behavioral health department here. And this is our podcast, You Need a Counselor. So we are designed for people curious about counseling, but have barriers keeping them from experiencing the benefits of counseling. Our mission is to share stories about counseling, good, bad, and indifferent, and spread the message that everyone can benefit from mental health and behavioral health counseling services.
Our guest today is a third-time returning guest. We've got Lisa Boehm here with us today. Lisa is a author and has a new book coming out. Lisa helps people work with grief and has worked as a grief educator and a support service to families. After our first episode with Lisa, we got to hear about what it's like grieving a child and the loss of an adolescent child. In our second episode, we got to talk about boundaries and burnout in life. And we are very, very interested to hear about her new book that's coming out. It's called Now What? So welcome, Lisa. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me back, guys. I always look forward to our conversations and what unfolds.
Absolutely. So give us a little update now, because you've got this new book coming out. Now, what is this book about and how does it differ from your previous book?
Excellent question. You know, life is a funny thing. The only constant in life is that it's always changing. A couple of years ago, I was invited to speak at, for lack of a better word, a grief event. So as someone who, as you say, has endured the loss of a child, it's been over 10 years for me now, and a grief educator, I was invited to speak to a group of funeral professionals at their annual conference. And it was a phenomenal experience. And I really felt that I was able to not only speak to the audience, but really see them for the work that they do. You know, unfortunately, I have been on the side where, you know, less than 24 hours after receiving the news of our daughter dying in a car accident, you know, my husband and I found ourselves sitting at the funeral home. So just that experience. And then I was doing more speaking, and people were coming to me for different things. They were coming to me about change, right? I mean, grief and loss is a huge umbrella, as you ladies know, and as your listeners know. It's not always the death of a person, right? Grief and loss is the loss of anything that we care deeply about. It can be lost relationships, you know, a terrible health diagnosis, change in the workplace. You know, maybe you're the major breadwinner in your house and boom, you lose your job. That's grief. That's loss. And as my speaking expanded, I hired a speaking coach. And she said, well, what do you want to speak about, Lisa? Like, you've got all of this stuff to talk about. And I said, I want to speak about this massive thing called change. And she said, well, you know what? The best way to make yourself look like an expert in something is to write a book. And I said, oh my gosh, I did that once already. I don't know if I want to do it again. That's a big load to carry. But I started doing it last September. And even as we're talking here, I speak better when I have a pen in my hand. Like I feel good when I have a pen in my hand. I love to write. Ideas and thoughts and words tend to flow out of me fairly easily. And I just started putting some of these concepts down on paper. And I realized that in the last 10 years, everything that I've learned about grief, managing it, navigating it, helping others who are struggling either with personal loss of a loved one, or as we mentioned, loss of a situation, a relationship, their health, whatever. I had all these kind of private coaching things going on. And once I started putting pen to paper and my thoughts together, I realized, I have a bit of a framework here where people who are in any kind of situation that they find themselves in, when they're standing, I imagine myself standing on this precipice, this big thing has happened in your life, whatever it is, when you're standing there going, now what? And I feel like every single human over the age of probably 10 has found themselves in a situation where they are going, oh my gosh, now what? What do I do about this thing? And that's where this whole book was born from. And I'm really excited to share it with the world.
Well, yeah, like you said, change is such like a broad topic. Like there's so many, now what? There's so many different like options of what might happen. So like, what kind of is the like focus of it? Like on what to do after a loss, or I don't know, can you kind of go over like what maybe like the back of the book description of what it might be about?
Absolutely. And that's a great question, because I think a lot of people, because I've been working in this area of grief for so long and I'm not stepping away from it. So their question is, well, is it a grief book? There's actually a huge appendix in the back speaking directly to grief and how this framework can work with grief. There's a lot of different stories and experiences of my own that are directly related to the workplace. Everybody knows that change is constant in the workplace. I mean, I come from a healthcare background, and it just seems like, we just learned a new technology, or we've just implemented new software. Now our treatment techniques are changing. Now our staffing is changing. Now our equipment is changing, right? It's constant. And some of the calls that I'm getting now to speak are from departments and managers and supervisors saying, we're experiencing change fatigue. Like, I think that's almost new language that we're applying to these crazy work lives that we lead. And then we come home, right? Our kids are growing up. There's changes there. Relationships change in the household. One that I'm experiencing right now that I was aware of, but it didn't really hit me until I got to this stage of life, is aging parents. Holy moly, that's a big change. Change in relationship, change in their health, their mental abilities, all those things. So we go from change in the workplace and feeling depleted and burnt out to having to walk through the door at home, facing more changes. And so there's components to all of these things inside the book. And I'm a big storyteller. I mean, these are all factual stories, things that I've experienced, my clients have experienced. And so I weave the stories through as a way of bringing points home and how these different framework components can help people through.
Change fatigue. Now, what might make somebody experience change fatigue, whereas somebody else might go through the same number of changes or level of changes and be able to go through it without experiencing change fatigue?
Excellent question. I think, at the root of it all, we're all unique snowflakes. There's no two humans in this world that are exactly the same. And in addition to that, as we've mentioned, we all not only are unique people and have different capacities, but then when you look at our lives outside of the workplace, we don't always know what everybody's going through. who's maybe facing a health challenge in addition to the changes at work, who's going through a quiet divorce, whose teenager is experimenting with drugs and they're struggling as parents, right? So I think there's this compounding effect too. As humans, we can only take so much, right? So if there's a gazillion changes going on at work, but life at home is okay, and we've got a steady partner, our parents are healthy, our kids are doing well, we can take on a little bit more, it seems. But when our capacity is diminished at home and that weight is wearing us down already, and sometimes we have a decreased capacity to pay attention and to think, and that brain fog is kicking in, and maybe we're not sleeping well because what's going on at home, our capacity to face all those changes in the workplace also diminishes.
Do you see that happen? I know it kind of goes along with like the workplace burnout part of it. Do you see it in like specific fields, or could it really happen in any career field where they could have change fatigue and workplace burnout as well?
100%. As I mentioned, my background is in healthcare, specifically oncology. And it's a tough one because even my colleagues there now, critical staffing shortages. And yet the bottleneck of patient wait lists grows. Ethically, anybody who goes into healthcare, just about everybody, is there for the patients. The best outcomes for the patients. Well, anybody knows, especially in oncology, the sooner that we can offer treatments and chemo, radiation, surgery, whatever it is, the better chances that patient has for a good outcome. And that is a huge burden in healthcare. And I think it's in diagnostics, anything treatment focused. Nurses are at an all-time stress level. Their staffing levels are also terrible. Most places that I talk to, at least locally where I am, there's physician shortages and so on and so on and so on. So healthcare is something that I can definitely speak to. And I know just by being there on the front lines, we're expected to do more with less. And I don't think it's just healthcare. We've all, it doesn't matter what part of North America we live in, we're seeing the effects of the economy. As human beings, as a homeowner, as an adult making financial decisions, we're all doing more with less. So I think that there's just, as much as I want to answer your question more specifically, I think that all of this just kind of bubbles over into all aspects of life.
So how do we build that resilience? Because there's always going to be change. And there's always going to be more change than we can handle. There's always going, just like there's always going to be more things to be done than we can handle. There's always going to be more change in our lives than we can handle. So how do we become more resilient to those changes that are going to happen in our lives?
One, I think, is simply awareness. And, I think you nailed it perfectly. This is life. And life gets dicey, and we're not built to carry it all by ourselves, right? That's why therapy is so important. That's why a good support network is so important. But I think when it comes down to that resilience piece, I think, I always think back, and I don't remember if it was a teacher or a workplace, but I remember this poster, and I think everybody has seen this poster, where it's a picture of a mountain climber and they're going up this steep mountain, right? And the definition is resilience underneath, and it's, just putting one foot in front of the other, something or the ability to bounce back. And that definition makes me crazy, because I think anybody who's been through anything difficult in life, whether it's loss of a loved one, loss of job, any of these major changes or difficulties we're talking about today, will go, I don't go back to who I was before. I don't. And that pressure, I think, to go back to that person, to bounce back, actually works against us. Because then I think we're always focused in the past And in the past, we start asking questions like, what if? What if I'd done this? What if I hadn't done that? We don't have any control in the past. None, right? But to me, resilience is more just knowing that resilience involves falling down a lot. A lot. You're going to fall down. But resilience is getting up again and again. And more importantly, asking for help along the way. As Dr. Jody Carrington says, we were never meant to do this alone. And this can be life. This can be challenges. This can be whatever it is that you're going through. We were never meant to do this alone. We were meant to do this with the people that we care about and with the supports that are necessary. So I think it's just so important for people to know that, you know, resilience is not like that poster of somebody just climbing up the side of a mountain, because there's lots of slips. There's lots of missteps. There's a lot of taking breaks. We can't be resilient if we're just grind, push. That's a recipe for burnout. That's not a recipe for resilience.
I know you mentioned like asking people for help when they need it. I'm sure people obviously struggle with that. So do you give any advice to people that you might educate of like how to ask people for help and like who to ask for help when they're struggling as well?
Well, and I think that's the hardest part, is knowing who to ask. And the sad reality is that the people that we care about, our friends, our family, sometimes aren't the right people. They're either too close to the situation or they're just not equipped to help you. Right? Like my brother and I were talking about this not that long ago. And as we're seeing this shift in dynamic and relationship with our parents, as our parents get older, both my brother and I say we grew up in a very supportive and loving family. But now that mom and dad are having all these health issues and they've got all these concerns of their own, we don't bring up our stuff to mom and dad anymore. And if they do say, hey, you know, what about something that's going on? We tend to downplay it. And that's why I love my therapist, because I go and I see her and that's my hour. I can talk, I can cry, I can ask for input. It's just easy. It's just easy talking to my therapist. Whereas if I'm always talking to a friend, I feel like I'm dumping, even though I have some terrific friends. And, you know, that's part of our relationship, is that we share. But to me, it's easier and more comfortable going to my therapist because I'm paying her for that hour. And so she's going to listen to me and I don't have to feel bad about, you know, dumping or even maybe if I'm really upset with somebody saying so much, whereas I might hold back if I'm talking with a friend. But it is so important to express yourself. I think the more that we keep things inside or push them down, which is even worse, the more challenging it is to carry that load and the longer it takes to work through it when you're trying to do it yourself.
Yeah, I think sometimes the idea of, well, I'm paying for a therapist, you know, it doesn't always take into account what you're saying of whenever we talk with somebody or ask somebody for help, we're paying for that in some way. Now, we might not be paying money, right? But if we call our friend and we say, okay, I just got to say some things about what just happened today, right? We are paying for that because that's what a relationship is. A relationship is a give and take. If we're not giving in some way to that relationship, then it's a one-way relationship, and that's not healthy for either of us. And so if whether I'm calling my therapist during my therapy time and I'm paying that person in money for that time and for that support, if it's a friend or a family member, I'm not paying money, but I'm going to give to that relationship. And so sometimes there's this sense of like, well, my therapist cares or talks to me because I pay them money. Well, anytime somebody, right? Anytime that we're getting support in a two-way giving relationship, we are giving something of ourselves. We're giving our time to that family member or person. We're answering the phone and listening when they need to talk about something. And so we're doing that give and take all the time. And therapy it's a cleaner way to do it because the payment is separate from the issue that's happening. And so we don't have to say, okay, now we've been on the phone for 30 minutes and I've talked about this for 25 and how are you, right? We don't have to do that. But when we're in a friendship or a family relationship, that is what we want to do because we want to be giving to that relationship. We want to be also supporting them. Whereas with a therapist, we don't do that part as our kind of trade-off. So I really like that example. And I liked what you talked about in terms of that phrase, bouncing back with resilience, because what I was picturing was, if we look at our life, we look at a 10-year span and we look at the ups and downs, right? If we were to chart that, there's always going to be those ups and downs. And the phrase bouncing back kind of implies that we're bouncing back to that higher point on the chart, right? And what you were talking about in terms of being in the present moment, because that's the only place we have any control over is literally right now. We don't have control over what happens 5 minutes from now. We don't have control over what happened 5 minutes ago. We only have right now. What you're talking about is just riding that wave. And wherever the wave is at that given point is where we want to be if we're going to be in the present moment, versus the idea of bouncing back. Well, now there's a comparison set up. Automatically, there's a comparison, right? There's a comparison of either I'm doing better than I thought or expected of myself, or I'm doing worse than I thought or expected of myself. Whereas what you're talking about is just riding that line. If that line is lower today, then that's where it is. And if that line is higher today, then that's where it is, because that's where we are. So I thought that was really beautiful. And you talked about the framework of your book. Can you give us a little outline of kind of what that looks like and how it starts?
Absolutely. I love myself a good acronym. And I find, even back when I was in grade school, I always remembered things better when I could make a little word that stood for all the things. So the framework is called RESET, which I think is very, very aptly named. But in a nutshell, the R stands for release. We hold on to so much that we can't control. And I think when we can release those things that we can't control, that's when we can start making space to look forward, to make the changes, to, be in the present moment. Because I think control, and I'm guilty of this too, I'm a people pleaser and a reformed control freak, but we have a false sense of control. There's so much in life that we can't control. And letting go of that is so freeing. The second letter is E. And it stands for Energize. And this is one that I initially get some pushback when I'm working with clients. But the Energize is something that as adults, we have forgotten how to do. Now, I'm not talking about eating nutritious food here. I'm talking about fun. I don't know if anybody here listens to the Mel Robbins podcast. I'm kind of in and out of her podcast, but I listened to one and I think it was some kind of divine intervention. I needed to hear her message that day. But essentially, she talks about the fact that we save and save and save and save, and we plan and plan and plan and plan to take 1 week of holiday a year. Right? Like that 1 week in Hawaii or that 1 week wherever it is at the lake. And she said, why are holidays like that so much fun? Like, why do we look forward to them so much? She said, because it's different. It's exciting. Every coffee shop you go to is new. Every walk or hike that you go on is new. And she really painted this picture that we don't have to get this excitement and, all this stuff from 1 week of holidays, where in fact we can build these things into our lives. Case in point, my husband and I, a couple of summers ago, we had an elderly dog at home. So we were home a lot. We didn't plan any summer vacations or anything like that. We needed to be at home because our dog needed the care. And then unfortunately we had to put him down, and we kind of had this newfound freedom. And I said to my husband, let's just fill up the gas, or fill up the car with gas rather, and go on a little adventure. So we were gone from maybe 9 a.m. until 6 o'clock at night. It was the end of August. Where I live, all the farmers were out in their fields harvesting. It was a gorgeous, gorgeous, hot end of summer day. We stopped in all the little towns, tried out, all the cinnamon buns and all the bakeries and the local vineyards and, just some of the cool things that are off the highway that you never stop to do. And I took a 30-second video everywhere we stopped, and I put it all together when we got home. We still talk about that trip. And we've gone on some amazing holidays like to Southeast Asia and Morocco and Italy. That road trip was so much fun. And I think it cost us $50. Maybe more. Maybe the gas was more expensive, but you get the point. It was a tank of gas. And so I think it's really important, when we're going through these hard things, and as women, I'm going to say, we will have fun when the chores are done, when the laundry's done, after the husband gets back from golfing. We put ourselves at the bottom of the list, and we put fun even below that. We feel like, and I was raised this way too, you have fun when the work's done. Well, hello, the work is never done, ever. So that's number two. The S stands for strengthen. And I don't care who wants to argue with me on this one. I think it's a non-negotiable. And you ladies, I'll be curious to hear your thoughts, but strengthen essentially is self-care. When we are depleted, when we are burnt out, when we are exhausted and overwhelmed and all of these things that come with change, we can't do it. We can't do it if we are exhausted and we're not sleeping. We can't do it if we're not fueling our bodies well. Not McDonald's takeout, not, the pre-made lasagna from Costco. I'm talking about fruits and vegetables, things that grow naturally, things, lots of protein. Lots and lots and lots of water. You ladies know this, I know more than anybody else, but there's tons of data out there that suggests if we're just a little bit dehydrated, our chance of being depressed or anxious is staggeringly higher. So you gotta hydrate. Water, water, water. I'm not talking coffee. I'm not talking pop. I'm not talking those horrible little drops, but good old-fashioned water. And moving our bodies. I know when we're exhausted, we're depleted, we're grieving, all this, like you think, what? You want me to go for a walk? Yes, I do. Yeah, it's essential. You don't have to necessarily go and hit the gym, but get out and move your body. If you love yoga, go to yoga. There's loads of free videos, that you can stream online in your own home. So those are kind of the core pieces of strengthen. And the second E in reset is envision. And this is an important piece because I think when we're in the thick of it, whatever the it is that we're going through, standing on the precipice of change, your husband's walked out on you, or you just found out he's messing around on you, or, you lost your job, or any of these great, big, horrible changes that we go through, even menopause, ladies, it's not fun, aging parents, all of it, is we get so stuck in that we can't see what might be. And I think that is a huge part of getting unstuck, of dealing with the now what question is what can I envision from this, right? Like when we lost Katie, there was no good. There was no envisioning. There was just this horrific black hole in front of me. What do I do with this? What now? Now what? But now that I'm 10 years out, I look at this horrible thing that happened to me, the changes that I've made as a human being, I feel like I became a better mother to my son. I feel like my husband and my relationship actually got stronger. Would I have wanted this horrible thing to happen, to have these good outcomes? Heck no. Absolutely not. But now I'm in a different place, and I can share Katie's message with the world. I can envision a place where I am of service to others. I can envision that when I make changes, let's say to my health, doing things that are better for me, for my health, I can envision a stronger, healthier Lisa. A stronger, healthier Lisa that is more comfortable when we're hiking, when we're traveling, when we're doing these things. When I am looking at changes of taking on a coach to help me through, I can envision an outcome. And when we don't have that vision, call it a goal, call it whatever you want, we've got nothing to move towards. And even if that envisioning is at the simplest level, it's to feel better emotionally, I'd say that's a pretty good goal. But if you can't see it, you can't believe it. And if you can't believe it, you can never move towards it. So envisioning is very, very important. And the last one is T, which is take action. And again, that just makes sense. We can read all the self-help books. We can go to therapy. We can want to make changes, but until we take action and move forward to do some of these steps I've talked about, things will never change. I mean, we've all heard the saying, if nothing changes, nothing changes. And I'll also share a bonus chapter that I wrote in the back of the book. And because if people are just too overwhelmed, wherever they're at in life, too overwhelmed to apply any of this, this is the thing for them. And I'm not the first person to come up with this. It's been used by tons of people, but I call it a 1% shift. So no matter where you're at, like even let's talk about perhaps the worst of the worst, losing a child. A 1% shift, maybe you're stuck in bed. Maybe you literally cannot get out of bed. Well, a 1% shift might be moving to the couch. Maybe it's getting up, putting on fresh pajamas, and getting back to bed. So wherever you are, what's a 1% shift that I can make today? Maybe it's picking up the phone and making an appointment with your therapist. It's a great 1% shift. Maybe it's, I'm going to drink more water today. I know that would help me. Maybe what's one boundary I can set today? Right? I've got the PTA calling me, blood services wants, me to come and donate more blood. My neighbor wants me to, help with the block party, blah, 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 blah. We've all got a list like that. What's one thing I can take off my list today? So I think especially when we're talking about resilience, if we circle back to that, I think resilience is this great big thing, right? Like climbing a mountain. Well, what if we break that down into manageable pieces? I mean, at the end of the day, how do you climb a mountain? One tiny step at a time. Even if you only make one step difference every week, right? Eventually you look back and you go, whoa, look at how far I've come. Like and then, if you want to say, well, a 1% change every day for a year, think of the changes you could make in your life. So that's the framework in a nutshell.
So do you recommend people do it as like steps, like first release, then energize? Or is it kind of like maybe today you're going to focus on this and then you'll go back to this and kind of just like all over the place? So how do you recommend people like kind of follow that framework?
I actually have at the very beginning of my book, how to use this book. And it's definitely written from a very trauma-informed background that, what speaks to you today, like flip to the section that makes sense for you today. And just keep plucking away at it. Like we just said, I mean, the key to anything is to keep moving, to keep putting that one foot in front of the other. So find what speaks to you in the book and lean into it, and then maybe you come back a week later, a month later, when you're ready to look at the next chapter. It is definitely not something that is meant to be, the cure-all, if you will, for everything that people are going through, but more very supportive and compassionate based ideas and approaches to help them.
Absolutely. When we're thinking about the release step, you talked about that false sense of control that, we're often reminded, oh man, I thought I had control over that. I thought that if I did this, this would happen. And we're often reminded, nope, it doesn't work that way. How do we know if we're looking at a situation or we're looking at maybe a next action that we might take? How do we know if that's something that we truly do have control over? There are some things that we do. Or if that's something that we need to let go of the idea that we can control.
That's a tough one, honestly. There's some concrete things where we can say, oh yeah, if I don't run the dishes through the dishwasher tonight, I will have dirty dishes tomorrow, right? Like that's a very if this, then that. But I think taking a step back is really important. Here's one that is a personal reference to me. So after we lost our daughter, Katie, in a car accident, my son was 15 years old at the time, and he was rebelling in every way possible. And so, right or wrong, I don't know how you do the best you can, right? But I helicopter parented big time. I got him up. I made his breakfast. He was 15 years old. I made his lunch. I drove him to school. I brought him home. And it took me a while to realize that I was not, in fact, helping him. I was there to support him 100%. I was going to do anything I could to support him. But I was almost making things worse for him. I was in a subliminal way. I think I was telling him, you're not capable of this, so I'm going to do it for you. So I think if we can step back from a situation, because if you're not clear, right, take a step back. How does this feel for you? And I think, as parents, especially with children, no matter how old they are, we want to protect them from everything, right? So we want to do the things. We want to set them up for success. But if we can take an assessment, and maybe this sounds too woo-woo, I hope I'm not a little bit too much out there, but I have started listening to myself a lot better. And how does this feel in my gut? Because if I feel it in my chest, typically that's anxiety for me. Anxiety. And I think a lot of anxiety comes from fear. If I let this go, if I hand this project off to someone at work, if I say no to my mother, right? I feel it in my chest. That's not mine to carry. But if I feel it kind of in my gut, I'll do a gut check. Does this feel good? I said no to my mother this past weekend, and it felt really good. It felt like what I needed to do in that moment. We talk about the workplace, about speaking up at work, about speaking up to say, you know what? I can't take this extra project on right now. I'd be happy to help you with it next week. Practice it in your head. How does it feel? How does it feel? So it's a tough one. And I think when we are used to controlling everything, when we are used to holding on to everything, this can feel really yucky. It can feel really awful. It can feel like you're losing control or that you're not capable. And actually, when we let go of things, we're proving to ourselves that we are more capable. Because when we have those boundaries, we feel like, yeah, this is me. I'm taking care of me right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I love those examples, right? The dishes and packing our child's lunch and our, maybe a boundary that we set at work. And I find that in both situations, or in any situation, there are the things that we can and there are the things that we can't. And you had talked about talking to ourselves too, and I love that. Because if we can say out loud, like, okay, I can't control this and I can control this. So with the dirty dishes, I actually can't control if I have dirty dishes tomorrow, because even if I wash dishes right now, my kid is going to mess up, right, some of the dishes, and there's going to be strawberry peels on things, and right. So I can't control if I have dirty dishes tomorrow or if I clean dishes tomorrow, but I can control if I washed dishes today. I know that I did a dishes step today, and I can't control if my it's funny because my child's 9 and now she's starting to pack her own lunch, and I'm trying to like have her be responsible for that, because I'm not going to run a lunch up to the school when she forgets it or doesn't pack enough. And so I gotta go, okay, I can't control whether my child has lunch at school tomorrow, whether she forgets it in the morning or packs it or whatever, but I can control, is there food in the house that she can pack? And with my boss, can I control how my boss feels about the boundary that I've set or what they do with the boundary that I've set? No, I can't. But I can control if I am clear in that boundary, and if I'm respectful in that boundary, and how I feel about that boundary, like you said, checking in with ourselves. And so I really love that that's the first. I was wondering, like, what's the R going to be? And release of control is such a powerful one, because I think, and I love that it starts there and it goes into next action, because I think so much of the time it's so tempting when we're uncomfortable to go straight into action and go, okay, what do I got to do? Right. And release of things we don't have control over doesn't necessarily feel like, oh, I'm not being productive, right? It doesn't feel like we're doing something towards that. And so having that acronym that reminds us to, like, no, let's start there, maybe even before we take action, allows us to take that action in the right space where we're aligned with what we actually want to have happen going forward. So I thought that was wonderful. And Energize, you talked about having fun and how it doesn't always come naturally, right? It's not like, oh, this is the next natural action. So what kinds of things do you suggest that people do in order to prioritize that fun and maybe let go of some of the guilt that comes with, like, hey, I'm outside coloring with chalk in the driveway and there's like dishes to be done and laundry to be done and I got homework and all of those things?
I did this, and this is what works for me. Everybody's different, but as I still struggle, and I don't know if it's the way that I was raised, with this mindset, like you can have your fun when all the things are done. But I started scheduling it into my day, literally. So Wednesday evenings from 7 to 9 is my time. And that looks different from week to week, but typically it's coffee with somebody different at a different coffee shop, or a walk, if it's summertime and we can go for a walk around the lake. And then Sunday afternoons from 2 to 4, roughly. Sometimes I change it, but that's creativity time for me. And, I sew, I paint, I went to pottery class at that time, take dancing lessons. But I think, if you're asking the question, well, what do I do? I schedule it. I schedule a couple hours a week. Now what do I do? I think the question that is the most helpful is to ask folks 2 questions. Number 1 is, what did you like to do as a kid? What lit you up? And for me, it was getting on my bike, and it was meeting all the other neighborhood kids at the park and playing tag and running around and being outside in fresh air. So that was a starting point for me. And then the other question is to ask yourself is, what things have been kind of in the back of your mind one day when I have time, blah, blah, blah. What would I like to do? Maybe bucket list items, but they don't have to be that big. Well, for me, it was taking a pottery class. I'm not very good at it. I've got some really sad looking projects on my desk here, but I did it and it was fun. As I said, I love to paint. Learning new things. I love to learn new things, whether it's languages or, how to write a book or any of these things. I love these things. And have a running list. because I think we forget. And have that schedule in your phone, or if you like, to write things on a good old fashioned calendar, whatever it is, write it so you can't miss it. And you hold yourself accountable to that fun, that time. And if all you can squeeze in is half an hour, I don't care. Do it. But make sure it's something that you love to do. And keep that promise to yourself. It's just like a workout. It's just like brushing your teeth, frankly. It's keeping your tank full. Joy fills our tank. Joy gives us more energy. Joy gives us that balance when things are really heavy so that we can go back and do the heavy thing.
Yeah. And then the second E was Envision. And I know you talked about, like, obviously there was positives, like being a good mom to your son, and yours and your husband's relationship strengthening. But at the time when something like your daughter dying happens, like, it's hard to envision that future. What about people who are struggling with, like, I have no idea what to envision or what that looks like? Like, where do you kind of get them to, like, start thinking about that?
And I talk about that in my book too, because, I can think of 1,000 different examples where you'd be like, are you kidding me? You want me to envision something good here? But the whole idea is to plant the seed. Plant the seed. And I think when people are going through the really horrible things, is even hope. Hope is in envisioning a better day. Maybe you're just envisioning a day where you can get through the day without crying. Right? Like, we don't have to envision these great grand things. I'm going to write a book and I'm going to save the world. And those are great. But what would make you feel better? Can you envision a day where you can maybe support somebody else who's going through this same thing that you're struggling with? So just planting the seed, taking the pressure off having an answer today, but just planting the seed and keeping in mind that hope is one of the most powerful things that we can have.
Yeah, just being willing or open to the possibility that there could be a day where things are different, or where we feel different, or where we feel more at peace. We did a episode yesterday, and somebody used fantasizing as a verb. They said I was doing this, and then I was fantasizing, and it said I love that, because it is a step that doesn't always come naturally, and especially if we're experiencing a traumatic situation, that part of our brain kind of turns off, for sometimes for very good reason. And so it's allowing that to kind of come back in. And when we talk about, you talked about anxiety and sometimes where we can feel that anxiety, and anxiety is just fantasizing, but not on purpose, right? Like, it's imagining and it's envisioning, but it's not on purpose or with our own interests in mind. When we have anxiety, our imagination is at full throttle. Our imagination is going, which means that we can envision, because we're envisioning the worst. So even the idea that, okay, this thing happened, when we think about, okay, what does 10 years from now look like? And if we go, I just, in my head, it's the same. In my head, I'm still in bed. I can't talk to anybody, right? We can go, okay, then you can envision, because you did envision that 10 years from now, things are going to be completely different. We just didn't do it on purpose. So now let's do it on purpose. Let's try out and be open to the idea, even if it's like, hey, picture it as a cartoon. Because our brain is going to say, picturing that is self-defeating, because then I'm going to feel like that might happen, and it's not going to happen. So I'm not going to picture it. But if we picture it as a cartoon, if we picture it as, cartoon characters that we're familiar with, like, what would it look like if Winnie the Pooh and those characters did it? Breaking that out and having it feel that kind of ridiculousness, but going, yeah, well, it is ridiculous. We're envisioning cartoon characters, right? Allows us to go there mentally too, and be able to say, okay, I feel silly envisioning something better or hoping for something better. But that's the point of the activity, is that we are doing something silly.
Something that just came to me too as you were speaking, and I thought, what can be helpful when folks are going through change, like say change at work, is if we know why we're doing the hard thing, right? If we're going through this massive software change, but you know what? At the end of the 6 months, I'm never going to have to run that stupid report again, right? And focusing on that, not the change that you're enduring right now. Or maybe you're that cancer patient who's sitting in the chair and getting their fourth chemotherapy treatment, and you're going to feel like garbage after and all this, but you're envisioning a healthy future. I have to go through this thing right now. I don't like it. I don't like being here, but I can envision a healthy me. So it's kind of changing our perspective sometimes and taking ourselves out of the muck and into the what could be. Yeah.
Absolutely. It goes to purpose, and
Yeah.
being able to have that purpose. We do that in projects all the time here at work, right? We'll go, okay, we're doing this project so that we never, in a year from now, this is not a thing we have to think about again, right? And yeah, absolutely that envision part. So I love those ideas of it, and that possibility, right? Is it possible that a year from now some things could look different, or what would that piece look like? I just think is so great. And then take action. So how do we stop ourselves from getting a little bit too into the action, right? Because sometimes we go, okay, I'm ready to take action, I'm going to change everything, and then we get burnt out, as you talk about. So how do we kind of pace ourselves in that action step as we're moving forward?
Absolutely. And that's an excellent point to make. We can burn out real quick if we try and change everything all at once. But I think that's where that bonus chapter really comes in, about the 1%. Like some days we can take a 5% step. Some days it might be a 0.05 step, but just try to keep things manageable and think about what's the next best step in this situation. Is the next best step asking for help? A lot of times it is. Sometimes that's the best thing you can do. Is the next best step releasing one thing that I can't control, that's just bogging me down? Is the next best step taking care of myself today? Maybe laying on the couch today is the next best step, right? What do I need right now? And what's the one thing that I can do? And just keep it simple.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, if somebody's listening and they maybe are going through a change or in thinking about starting counseling, what suggestion might you give them to start counseling?
Pick up the phone. I think the hardest thing is just taking the first step. I can't think of a single person that I know that has not benefited from speaking with a counselor or therapist. So just pick up the phone, make the appointment.
Wonderful. All right. And so this has been a great conversation, as always. I feel like every time you're on, we have just so much to talk about. And I love the distinction that you're making now between grief and change, because they're so often used interchangeably. But they are very different concepts, and there's so much that goes into each. And I just think you're really doing the work of untangling the two, right? And kind of defining the two and giving people practical things to do. So I think that's wonderful. So thank you so much for being here, Lisa. This has been great. And we will look forward to that new book. So it's called Now What, which, when you talked about the imagery of standing at the edge of a precipice, or standing at the edge of a road, and going, now what, that really stuck with me. So I think that's a wonderful book for somebody to pick up when they're feeling that they're standing in a place like that.
Absolutely. I'm Lisa Boehm, and I need a counselor.
And I'm Chrissa Hunt.
And I'm Julie Johnson, and we need a counselor.
And so do you.
Thank you for listening to the You Need a Counselor podcast. We are so grateful that you're here. You can also find and connect with You Need a Counselor on Facebook and Instagram. If you've enjoyed today's show, please take a moment to like, review, or leave a comment, as all of these things help others to find and benefit from the podcast as well. If you're in the state of Iowa and interested in mental health counseling or behavioral health intervention services, give us a call at 800-531-4236.